There is something about being a kid in America in the 1980s that stays with people forever. The freedom, the cartoons, the toys that seem magical. If someone grew up during that decade, they carry those memories like a secret language only their generation understands. This was a time when childhood still happened mostly outdoors. Kids left the house after breakfast and came home when the streetlights flickered on. There were no cell phones to track them, and no text messages checking in. Parents trusted the neighborhood, and kids roamed free in ways that seem almost unimaginable now. This was the decade that gave America MTV, Nintendo, E.T., and a toy aisle that felt like a wonderland. The Cold War cast a shadow, but Saturday morning cartoons provided light. Childhood in the 1980s was shaped by Reagan, by malls, by the explosion of pop culture aimed directly at young people. For better or worse, this was when being a kid became big business. Let's walk through what it actually felt like to grow up during that unforgettable decade. Some of this might bring back memories that hit like a wave. Some of it might explain why people who grew up then talk about it so much. Let's step into that world. The American home in the 1980s was the backdrop to childhood. The earth tones of the 1970s were fading, replaced by pastels and bold primary colors. Mauve walls, dusty rose couches, teal accents everywhere. The look was softer, but somehow busier. The family room was command central. This was where the television sat, still a bulky piece of furniture, but increasingly important. Most families had one main television, and it was often on. The remote control was becoming standard, and kids were still frequently asked to get up and change the channel. The VCR changed everything about childhood entertainment. Suddenly, movies could be watched at home. Video rental stores appeared in every strip mall. Going to Blockbuster on a Friday night became a ritual. Walking those aisles, scanning the rows of VHS tapes, trying to agree on a movie with siblings. The excitement of finding a new release still in stock. The disappointment of seeing an empty case for the movie everyone wanted. Kids could now watch their favorite movies over and over. Some children watched E.T. dozens of times. The Princess Bride, The Goonies, Ghostbusters. These films became memorized, quoted endlessly, woven into the fabric of childhood. The kitchen now had a microwave, and with it came an explosion of microwavable foods. Hot Pockets appeared in 1983. Kid cuisine frozen dinners let children heat their own meals. Lunchables arrived at the end of the decade. Food was becoming faster and more convenient, designed for busy families and latchkey kids who came home to empty houses. Being a latchkey kid was common. With more mothers working outside the home, millions of children came home from school to houses with no adults. They wore house keys on strings around their necks. They let themselves in, made snacks, watched television, and did homework alone until parents returned from work. It was normal. Kids adapted. Saturday morning was sacred. Children woke early, sometimes before dawn, and planted themselves in front of the television. The networks programmed cartoons from around 6 in the morning until noon. This was appointment viewing that required no appointments. The cartoon lineup was relentless. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, Transformers, G.I. Joe, Thundercats, She-Ra, Jim and the Holograms, The Smurfs. These shows were essentially 30-minute commercials for toy lines, but kids did not care. The stories felt epic. The characters became icons. Cereal commercials punctuated every break. Lucky Charms, Frosted Flakes, Cookie Crisp, Count Chocula. Kids ate sugary cereal from mixing bowls while watching cartoons. This was the routine. Parents slept in while children consumed hours of animated entertainment. The toys from these shows filled bedrooms across America. Action figures lined shelves. Play sets took over floors. The toy industry was booming, marketing directly to children through their favorite shows. Christmas wish lists were long and specific. Kids knew every character, every vehicle, every accessory. Cabbage Patch Kids created shopping hysteria in 1983. Parents fought in store aisles to get them. News cameras captured the chaos. Each doll came with adoption papers and a unique name. The marketing was genius. Kids were not buying toys, they were adopting babies. Before we continue with the culture and experiences that shaped these young lives, if you are enjoying this look back at American childhood and want to explore more decades and places, consider subscribing. There are so many more stories about how Americans grew up and how different life used to be. The arcade was a cathedral for kids in the 1980s. Dark rooms filled with glowing screens and electronic sounds, the smell of popcorn and carpet cleaner, rows of machines demanding quarters. Pac-Man dominated the early decade. Kids memorized patterns, competed for high scores, and spent allowances 1 quarter at a time. Donkey Kong introduced the world to Mario. Space Invaders, Galaga, Centipede, and Defender each had its devotees. Arcades were social spaces. Kids gathered there after school, on weekends, and during summer vacations. They watched each other play, learned techniques, and formed hierarchies based on skill. Being good at video games meant something in the social order of childhood. Then Nintendo arrived. The Nintendo Entertainment System launched in America in 1985, and it changed everything. Suddenly, arcade-quality games could be played at home. Super Mario Bros. Became a shared experience for an entire generation. Kids traded tips about hidden warp zones and secret power-ups. The console created new social dynamics. Having a Nintendo meant friends wanted to come over. Kids would gather around televisions, passing controllers, competing and cooperating. They played Duck Hunt with the orange plastic gun. There was the impossibility of beating Mike Tyson in Punch-Out, and the legend of someone's older brother who could actually beat Contra without the code. Playing outside was still central to childhood, but the landscape was changing. Neighborhoods had fewer stay-at-home parents watching from windows. Stranger danger became a constant message. Missing children's faces appeared on milk cartons, a daily reminder at the breakfast table that the world contained dangers. Despite these fears, kids still played outside for hours. Bicycles provided freedom and transportation. Kids rode everywhere, sometimes miles from home. No helmets, no GPS tracking, just the understanding to be home before dark. Big wheels and green machines dominated driveways and sidewalks for younger children. The plastic vehicles could spin out dramatically, leaving skid marks on concrete. Older kids moved to BMX bikes, attempting tricks seen in movies and magazines. Neighborhood games filled summer evenings. Kick the can, capture the flag, manhunt. Games that required nothing but other kids and imagination. Flashlight tag after dark. The sounds of children shouting as fireflies blinked across suburban lawns. Skateboarding exploded. Kids built ramps and driveways from plywood scraps. The sport was rebellious, associated with punk rock and counterculture. Parents worried. Kids covered their walls with Thrasher magazine posters. MTV launched in 1981 and rewired teenage brains. Music videos became essential. Artists were no longer just voices on the radio, they were visual spectacles. Michael Jackson's Thriller was a cultural earthquake. Madonna shocked parents and thrilled teenagers. Prince blurred every line. For kids approaching adolescence, MTV was a window into a world that felt dangerous and exciting. The channel played around the clock. Kids would watch for hours, absorbing fashion, attitude, and music. The influence on how young people dressed, talked, and thought about themselves was enormous. Music defined social groups. Kids who liked heavy metal wore denim jackets with band patches. Kids who liked hip-hop adopted that fashion. New wave kids had asymmetrical haircuts and wore black. Music was identity, and the divisions were serious. School in the 1980s had its own texture. Classrooms still had chalkboards. Teachers used overhead projectors. Kids passed handwritten notes folded into complicated shapes. There were no computers in most classrooms until late in the decade, and even then they were novelties. Fashion was loud. Neon colors and oversized sweatshirts were everywhere. Jelly shoes and friendship bracelets showed up on every playground. Izod shirts with the collar popped. Members-only jackets were common. Jordache and Guess jeans were status signals. What kids wore mattered intensely. Brand names were status symbols even in elementary school. The mall was the center of teenage social life. Kids would spend entire Saturdays there, moving from store to store, eating in the food court, and seeing movies at the multiplex. The mall was climate-controlled, safe, and full of things to want. It was where teenagers learned to be consumers. Fast food was everywhere and unremarkable. McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Taco Bell. Happy Meals came with toys that kids collected. Eating fast food was normal, frequent, and cheap. Nobody talked about nutrition. The Cold War cast a shadow that children felt without fully understanding. Nuclear war was discussed in schools. The day after, a television movie about nuclear apocalypse was watched by 100 million Americans in 1983. Kids had nightmares. The threat felt real, even if abstract. The Soviet Union was the enemy, visible in movies and news and video games where Americans always won. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, it marked the end of something kids had grown up assuming was permanent. The world was changing, and childhood in the 1980s was ending with it. What defined growing up in America in the 1980s was this peculiar combination of freedom and fear, innocence and marketing, outdoor play and screen time. It was the last decade before the internet, before cell phones, before the constant connectivity that now defines childhood. Kids in the 1980s had independence that seems foreign now. They walked to school alone, they played unsupervised, they solved problems without calling parents for help. But they were also the first generation fully targeted by advertisers, the first to have entertainment designed specifically to sell them products. For those who lived it, the 1980s remained vivid. The smell of a new Nintendo cartridge, the sound of a dot matrix printer, the taste of orange drink from a plastic pitcher, the freedom of a summer day with no plans, the particular magic of childhood before everything changed. For those with memories of this remarkable era, there is always more history to explore.